All right, you're good to go.
Awesome. Greetings, everyone. Welcome. My name is Cheyenne. My pronouns are they, them, and I am the Cleveland Foundation Public Service Fellow here at Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. Thank you all for joining us today. We are very excited to be hosting this webinar and to be talking with you about our 2022 grant programs. Next slide. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County is land that was claimed by the United States government through force, displacement, and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Northeast Ohio today. Thank you to Lake Erie Native American Council for guiding us in the creation of that statement. We also want to acknowledge the collective stress and trauma that some of us may be experiencing and bringing with us today, from the still very real pandemic to the impact of climate change and symptoms of systemic racism, and we are all experiencing collective anxiety, stress, and trauma. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture stands in solidarity with those fighting against racism. We condemn the racist acts of police brutality that continue to impact Black Americans in Cuyahoga County and across our country. Black Lives Matter. As an organization, we are recommitting and re-expressing that Black Lives Matter amidst the insurrection and threat to democracy that took place on January 6, 2021. We also realize that statements without actions are ultimately empty. We commit to look inward as we continue to reshape our grant making and organization to be anti-racist and more equitable. We invite organizations and artists to take action and connect with resources to perpetuate racial equity in your own organizations and communities. We must work together actively to move towards racial justice. Now, we have a lot of people here today, so we won't have time for everyone to introduce themselves, but we want to know who is in the room. So if you could please introduce yourself, state your name, pronouns, and organization you are representing in the chat function, we'd really appreciate it. At this time, I'll allow the rest of the CAC team to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luis Gomez. Pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm one of the program managers at CAC. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm also a program manager at CAC, and I'm looking forward to sharing a bit more about our grants today.
Hello, everyone. My name is India Pierre Ingram, pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm the Grant Operations and Racial Equity Initiatives Manager at CAC. So I'm glad to be speaking with you all today.
Great, fantastic. So today we will cover who CAC is, what we do, and how we do it. We'll share information about what funding opportunities are accepting applications this summer. We'll share an overview of CAC's application process, including key dates and steps from our guidelines, and then we'll answer any questions you might have. So, next slide. So Cuyahoga Arts and Culture is the public funder for arts and culture in Cuyahoga County. We are a political subdivision of the state of Ohio, and our footprint is Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County residents created Cuyahoga Arts and Culture in 2006 when they approved a tax on cigarettes to support arts and culture in our community. This levy was renewed in 2015 and now runs through 2026. Our mission is to inspire and strengthen the community by investing in arts and culture. Cuyahoga Arts and Culture achieves its mission by investing in 501c3s, arts and culture organizations, and projects in Cuyahoga County through 3 grant programs: General Operating Support, Project Support, and new this year, Cultural Heritage, which we will talk about in just a minute. Since 2006, we've invested more than $207 million in 436 arts and culture organizations and activities across the county. This year, CAC is investing over $12 million through grants to organizations who bring arts and culture to life in our community. including $1.6 million to 231 organizations receiving project support funding and $10.2 million to another 65 organizations receiving general operating support funding. It's through these investments that we work to realize CAC's vision that every resident can experience a meaningful and cultural life. Next slide. So outside of these three primary grant programs, CAC has several additional ways that we're investing in arts and culture in our community. Some other grant programs and most are in partnership with other funders or organizations. So we have support for artist opportunities. Earlier this year, we had Julio de Burgos Arts and Cultural Center, Spaces, Caramoo House, and Lynn Studios, support for artist opportunities. We also have the IOB Matching Fund for Arts and Cultural Projects. We will continue our matching fund program with IOB. This is open to community groups and nonprofits that are currently receiving PS2, Project Support 2 funding. We also partner with Neighborhood Connections, Neighbor Up grants. You can apply for their COVID-19 Action Fund, which we are funding arts and culture projects that center a response to COVID-19. For IOB, you can't apply for funding for your CAC funded project, and for IOB, you can't access the matching funds if you're fundraising for your CAC funded project. You can still use funds from IOB for your CAC funded project if you aren't accessing the matching funds. We also have Arts and Culture Network Night. That happens every other month. The last one was really fun. If you are interested in being part of the mobilization team or in hosting a conversation at Arts and Culture Network Night, please let Luis Gomez know. We also have opportunities for any artists or arts organizations through clevelandartsevents.com. You can post your events, your jobs and classifieds, and we have an artist directory. Even if your organization isn't eligible for one of our primary grant programs, one of these opportunities might still work for you. Please contact a program manager if you have any questions. Next slide, please. Here are just a few pictures from some of the events and activities that have been supported in part by CAC funding in the past, specifically in 2020. We'll get into specific eligibility requirements later, but many of the organizations that receive CAC funding do not have a primary mission of arts and culture, but are doing amazing arts and culture programming through their work. Grant recipients include community development corporations, after-school programs, and mental health agencies, as well as organizations that focus only on arts and culture programming. It's also important to point out that CAC's definition of arts and culture, which is based on the Ohio Revised Code, includes the natural sciences. This means that we fund science and nature-based programming, in addition to other disciplines like music, performing arts, and visual arts. Next slide, please. On the topic of the way that we define arts and culture, it's defined in the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3381. CAC's enabling laws included, but not limited to, literature, theater, music, dance, ballet, painting, sculpture, photography, motion pictures, architecture, archaeology, history, natural history, or the natural sciences. At this point, I will pass it to Julia.
Thanks, Shai. So CAC claims equity as an organizational value with a specific focus on racial equity. Racial equity is defined as the condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicted in a statistical sense how one fares. So when we use this term, we're thinking about racial equity as one part of racial justice. And so we also include work to address root causes of inequities, not just their manifestation. This includes elimination of policies, practices, attitudes, and cultural messages that reinforce differential outcomes by race or fail to eliminate them. We lead with race with the recognition that racial inequities have been baked into government and grant making, and that racial inequities are deep and pervasive across indicators for success. We also know that other groups of people are still marginalized, including based on gender, sexual orientation, ability, and age, to name a few. Focusing on racial equity provides the opportunity to introduce a framework tools, and resources that can be applied to other areas of marginalization. CAC continues to do our own internal learning and programmatic adjustments, and we've been offering opportunities for our grant recipients to learn along with us through workshops with Equius Group and the Racial Equity Institute through Third Space Action Lab. In addition, we work to thread racial equity throughout our grant making process, which I'll get to that part in just a second. But you can find more information, including our Power of Words video and racial equity language video on our website, cacgrants.org/racial equity. So can we get to the next slide, please? So moving on to our grant making, we're going to give an overview of our 3 primary grant programs, starting with our new Cultural Heritage Grant. The goal of this program is to support arts and culture organizations that are representative of a culturally specific population. This grant provides flexible funding, so it can be used for eligible organizational expenses. And so that means that you don't need to apply with one specific project. It's a 1-year grant cycle, so funds must be used for 2022 expenses. And this grant is for organizations that meet our specific definition of cultural heritage organization. And so what that means is that it's an organization that's representative of a culture or a culturally specific population. For example, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, North African, or another culturally specific population. And so we have some additional metrics on how that designation is determined that I'll talk about in just a minute with part of our eligibility. So Louise, can we go to the eligibility slide? So to be eligible for the Cultural Heritage Grant, organizations need to meet all of the following criteria. Have a primary mission to produce, present, or create programs or activities in areas directly concerned with arts or cultural heritage for the general public. And so that is as defined by the definition that Shai showed earlier from the Ohio Revised Code. You must have a permanent and viable base in Cuyahoga County for at least 2 years prior to June 3rd of this year. Applicant organizations must have a business address in Cuyahoga County and conduct the majority of its programs and services in the county. The organization must be a 501c3 nonprofit as verified by GuideStar's Charity Check and be incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State. The group must have an IRS Form 990 or 990EZ. And so the note I'll make here is that this does not include 990N. If this is an issue, we have some resources around it, so you can connect with a program manager specifically about this. And the organizations must have previously received and successfully completed at least 2 project support grants from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. And then we have another slide of eligibility. So groups must have an annual organizational expenses of less than $500,000, and that's determined by that 990. And then finally, coming back to that cultural heritage specification. So organizations must be authentically representative of the population they serve, as evidenced by at least 50% of staff and board combined being made up of individuals from a culturally specific population, or another clear expression of the organization being deeply rooted and able to authentically express the experiences of that culturally specific population. And the arts and culture programming is focused around that culturally specific population as well. So if you're curious about applying for this program, connect with your program manager. We are here to help, and we're also going to be hosting a Q&A session around this specific program in the upcoming weeks. We've got some details about that at the end. Next slide, please. So moving on to general operating support. This year, our GOS program will be open to applications. The goal for general operating support is to strengthen community through meaningful multi-year core support grants to arts and cultural organizations based in the county. This grant is for organizations with a primary mission to produce, present, or create programs around arts and culture. Again, that's as defined by the Ohio Revised Code's definition of arts and culture. And through this grant program, we provide these organizations with unrestricted funding, which means organizations can use the funds for many purposes. So unlike cultural heritage, it doesn't have to be connected to a specific cultural heritage. And unlike project support that we'll get to in a second, it doesn't need to be connected to a specific project or program. And then GOS is a 2-year cycle. So all of the grants are for both 2022 and 2023. So we only accept applications for this program every other year. And let's get to the eligibility slide. So to be eligible, again, you have to meet all of the following criteria. We talked about the mission of primary arts and culture and need to exist as a 501c3 for at least 3 years, or at least 5 years if you are a successor to an arts and cultural organization. And again, that's verified by GuideStar's Charity Check service. Organizations must be incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State and have a permanent and viable base in Cuyahoga County for at least 3 years prior to June 3rd of this year. Applicant organizations must conduct the majority of their local programs and services in Cuyahoga County and for residents and visitors of the county. Organizations have to have employed for a minimum of 2 years prior to June 3rd, at least one paid professional or cultural or administrative staff person working a minimum of half-time at or above the state minimum wage. So this staff person has to receive a IRS form W-2 from the organization that reports wages and taxes. And this person needs to have approval from the board of directors to sign for financial transactions or grant-related documents. And next slide. So continuing with the eligibility for GOS, groups with expenses of $750,000 or more in fiscal year 2020 must provide independently certified audited financial statements for fiscal years 18, 19, and 20. Groups with less than $750,000 can provide either an audit or reviewed financial statements for those years. So either an audit or a review is required. We require the 990 or 990 EZ. Groups must meet a minimum income threshold of $100,000 that's determined by the 990. And finally, organizations must have previously received and successfully completed at least 2 project support grants from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. So again, if you're interested in applying for the general operating support, the first step is to reach out to a program manager and schedule a meeting. We are really excited to help through this process, and we're here to help. So with that, I'll hand it over to Louise to talk about the project support grant.
Thank you, Julia. So speaking about project support, the purpose of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture Project Support Grant Program is to promote public access and encourage the breadth of arts and cultural programming in our community by supporting Cuyahoga County-based projects. Grant applications are reviewed annually through a transparent panel review process. CAC will offer project support funding in 2020 for projects occurring in the year 2022. So that's from January 1st all the way to December 31st. New this year, we will no longer have 2 separate project support programs. Instead, it will be one single program, and based on your grant amounts, eligibility and application requirements will vary. The program is open to both 501c3 organizations with and without a primary mission of arts and culture, as determined by CAC, as well as new applicants. Funding only for arts and culture projects based on our definition above are allowed. We only allow funding for projects occurring between January 1st and December 31st of 2022. So this is for next year. The SMU Data Arts Funder Report is required for organizations requesting more than $5,000. However, it will be an optional support material for organizations that are requesting less than $5,000. A one-to-one cash match is required for project support. For organizations requesting $5,000 or less, 50% of those matching funds can be in-kind donations, such as volunteer hours, free rental space, anything like that. And there's a definition of what we refer as in-kind in our guidelines. So who's eligible for project support? To be eligible for the 2020 Project Support Grant Program, applicant organizations must meet all the following eligibility criteria. Have a permanent and viable base of operations in Cuyahoga County for at least 1 year prior to June 3rd, 2021, as verified in part by the organization's Articles of Incorporation. Be a 501c3 organization as verified by GuideStar's Charity Check Service. Have produced or presented arts and culture programs open to the public within the previous 2 years prior to June 3rd, 2021. Be incorporated and authorized to do business in Ohio as verified by the Ohio Secretary of State, and provide the required financial documents which vary on the size of your grant amount. All organizations will either have to submit a 990, a 990N, or a 990 Easy for the most recently completed fiscal year. If you only have a 990, the grant amount that you are eligible for maximum is $5,000. Organizations without a primary mission of arts and culture, we will require a budget for publicly accessible arts and culture programming for the corresponding fiscal year. For a list of types of organizations that are not eligible to apply for our project support, please see our guidelines. So what is a project? A project is a specific connected set of activities with a beginning and an end. It has explicit goals and objectives and a predetermined cost that does not equal the organization's total annual budget. Projects may be a one-time event, such as a festival or an exhibit, or a defined series of events, such as a roster of classes or a series of productions. Series must have a cohesive theme that connects them all. The theme must be specific, and it can't be the type of art you practice or the organization's mission. If there's no cohesive theme to your project will be deemed as ineligible. This year, we will also not accept applications that include multiple projects or include all their arts and culture programming. An example of this would be submitting an application for a project that includes a series of concerts, a public art project, and virtual programming. We ask that you only submit one of your arts and culture projects. If you do this, your application will be deemed ineligible and not be moved to panel review. Again, the project must start and end in 2022. If there are components of the project, for example, if you start planning in the fall of 2021, that is more than perfectly fine. However, expenses cannot be covered for 2020, 2021, and your application should be focused on what is happening in 2022. Proposed projects must be arts and culture activities as defined by the Ohio Revised Code. If your project isn't arts and culture, your application will be deemed ineligible. Projects must be open to the public and take place in Cuyahoga County. Open to the public does not mean that the project or program must be free. There could be a cost associated with your project that is more than fine, and it will not impact your panel score. Now that we are living in this world where the majority of our events are still predominantly virtually, your project's components can be outside, like people can engage with your project outside of Cuyahoga County. However, CAC funds cannot be used for any expenses related to anything that happens outside of Cuyahoga County. Your project also, if it is virtual, should take place in Cuyahoga County. For example, it should be filmed here, produced, and use local talent. All right. So funding restrictions. Your application will ask you how you plan to spend the CAC funds. CAC funds can be used for most project expenses. This can include project supplies, the cost of paying artists or staff, administrative staff pulling together the project, pulling permits for the events, which the city is slowly lifting, and other logistic details such as a subscription to Zoom or any other live streaming platform. However, there are a handful of expenses that CAC funds cannot be used for. This includes fundraisers, receptions, food and beverage for both your participants and attendees, scholarships or regifting of the money in any sort of way, such as gift cards. Your project can still include these things, but those expenses need to come from your matching funds or your operations funds as an organization, and not your CAC funds. So please see the guidelines for a full list of what our funds cannot be used for. And so I do want to create some time for some questions before I head on to the next section of project support.
I have a question. My name is Susan. I work at Slavic Village Development, and I'm also here on behalf of the Museum of Creative Human Art. Can the match, one-on-one match, be other grants? And do those grant dollars have to be specifically earmarked for the 2022 calendar year?
So yes, so matching funds can come from other grants. So if you have a grant from the Cleveland Foundation, the Gun Foundation, or any sort of national organization, even federal or state grants, that money can be used. Any money that comes from your operation funds can also be used as a matching fund.
And does that grant have to be specific to be spent in 2022, or can it kind of be carried over from 21 to 22?
In regards to the grant that you get from the other organization?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't have any sort of regulations around that. So as long as like you have that money to be used as matching funds, you're good to go.
Great, thank you.
Louise, can I just jump in with a quick addition to that?
Of course.
The project expenses that you report on, though, do need to have been incurred in the 2022 calendar year. So any matching funds to cover all of those expenses essentially need to have been spent in 2022 also. So while you might have received the grant in 2021, the funds need to have been spent in 2022. So
I have a question, if I could just clarify. My name is Andrew Bida, and I noticed that when you went through the first two, the only way you could get those grants is if you had prior received a grant. So if I understand, as a first-time applicant, we would only be eligible for the third one for the project support. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we'll go into that a little bit. But yes, if you are a new applicant to CEC, the only project that you would be eligible, the only program that you would be eligible to apply for is project support. And your maximum grant amount that you can come in as a first-time applicant will only be up to $5,000.
Okay.
Louise, we have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
The first is, please, can you speak more on project definitions? No public art, no event series.
Whoever asked that question, could there be more specifics to that?
Sarah?
Yeah, I just turned my video on, sorry. Yeah, I think I heard you say no public art and no event series. You want a very discrete project, it sounds like.
A very specific project. So public art could be, so if you are doing like a mural where you're working with the community to create a mural for a specific location, you can do a public piece of art. You can also do a series if like your series is talking about, for example, Black suburbs in Cleveland, and you're doing multiple events related to that specific topic. You can do that. However, if you're coming in for a series of a public art exhibit, and then, for example, talking about maybe some outdoor walking guide event, you can't come in for all those three things. Those are three, we see those as three different types of projects. And so we would ask that you only select one of those three to come in for funding.
Got it. Thanks, Louise.
Of course.
The next question Is there a template of a budget that needs to be submitted for eligibility for project support?
There isn't. It is based on your arts and culture expenses for that specific project. However, if you are if you are a returning applicant and you are completing an data arts funder report, that gives us your revenue, your expenses. So that is an arts and culture budget. So you can submit that in lieu of an arts and culture budget, for example, using an Excel spreadsheet. But we currently do not have a template for that.
We have a question for the operating support grant. It says smaller organizations can have a financial review as opposed to an audit. Can you explain financial review?
Yeah. Julia, do you want to take that on?
Sure. So a review versus an audit are kind of technical terms that an auditing accountant or organization would use. And a review just provides a little bit of a limited assurance rather than a full audit of the organization. Heather might have more information on that too. Is there anything else I should add there?
All I would add is that it needs to be an independent review. So it can't be, an internal review of your financials. There needs to be an outside firm conducting that. But other than that, Julie's absolutely correct that it's just not as deep a dive into the financial controls as a full audit would be.
We have another question. Can you elaborate on open to the public and what exactly that means for a social service agency?
Yeah, and I believe we'll talk more about that in this workshop, but we'll also be talking about that in our application workshop because that does come up as a question specifically for organizations that are working with sensitive communities. We do fund social service organizations such as Greater Miami Cleveland, Hospice of the Western Reserve, university hospitals that are dealing with really sensitive populations. And so by public, we mean that the community that you are serving, which you are allowed to define, that community is aware that programming is taking place. So if you are hosting a series of art therapy sessions, and if there is a cost associated with that your community that you serve is aware that is happening and that they're able to access those workshops. It doesn't necessarily mean that the greater community, so for example, all Cuyahoga residents are allowed to participate in this workshop. As long as the community that you are serving can participate and is aware of the programming that you're creating, we consider that public.
Luis, can I add here also just that typically we do ask that because there is a component of needing to post the event on our arts and culture calendar. As Luis said, the workshops might be for the population that you're working with, but oftentimes there might be an exhibition that is open and available to the broader public of the artwork or a performance and things like that. So to kind of meet that public posting requirement as well. So I just wanted to add that as an approach that some of our groups take also.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Heather.
There's another question here.
Yeah.
Can you please talk about the 15% arts and culture expenses for organizations whose mission is not primarily arts and culture? The 990 and audited financials may not call out these department budgets. However, would a department budget or internal financial reports be acceptable?
So yeah, so I think will be a great lead off to talking about project support grant amounts. But yes, for the 15% allocations for project support, you can use like an internal arts and culture budget for all of your arts and culture programming as an organization. Again, that can be an Excel spreadsheet that you have, that you use. You can also use your CDP, so your cultural data profile, as I stated before, that lists your expenses and your revenues. So you could also use that if you do not have a current arts and culture budget as an organization. If your mission isn't arts and culture, or There's another way that we can also figure out your grant amount, which is using your previous project's final report. So at the end, you have to state all your expenses and your expenses, and which we can use for figuring out the total percentage for your grant amount. So I'm actually going to go into that section right now. So I'll talk about project grant amounts. When an organization is deemed eligible, the maximum grant amount that an applicant can request is determined by CAC staff, as outlined on this slide. Applicants will be notified of this amount when they are notified of their eligibility. So you'll receive an email that says, hey, you're eligible. This is going to be your grant amount. It's going to be listed on the email. This year, the maximum grant amount for project support is $20,000. Unless you're a new applicant, then your maximum grant amount is $5,000. If you are only submitting a 990N, your maximum grant amount is only $5,000 as well. So for applicants without a primary mission of arts and culture, grant amounts for for applicants with a primary mission of arts and culture, the maximum grant amount that a new applicant can request is $5,000, as I stated. If a 990N was completed for the most recent fiscal year, an organization's maximum grant amount is $5,000. If a 990 or 990 Easy was completed for the most recent fiscal year, an organization's maximum grant amount is 15% of total revenue line minus non-cash contributions. If this totals less than $5,000, the maximum eligibility request amount will be $5,000. For applications without a primary mission of arts and culture, the maximum grant amount, again, for new applicants is $5,000. Again, if you are only submitting a 990, the maximum grant amount is only $5,000. If the applicant completes a 990 or 990 Easy and is a current project support grant recipient, their maximum eligible grant amount will be determined on the following ways: using 15% of the previous year's CAC funded project's budget expenses estimated in your final report, or using 50% of an organization's intercultural expenses as indicated by a program budget in an organization's most recent 990 audit review financial statement or CDP. So what is the best fit for your organization? If you are trying to figure out what the program that best fits your organization needs, here are some questions to ask yourself. Has your organization received project support funding from CAC in the past 4 years? If this is a yes, then you are most likely eligible for a grant in project support larger than $5,000. And there is a potential that you can also be eligible for general operating support or cultural heritage. If no, then it could most likely mean that the grant amount, that the grant program that fits you best is project support. What size and budget of your organization? As we noted in both general operating support and cultural heritage, there is a maximum and a minimum budget for each organization to come in for funding. What is your organization's mission? So if your mission is in arts and culture, unfortunately, cultural heritage and general operating support is not open to you. However, project support does fund organizations whose mission isn't arts and culture. What is your organization's capacity? So staff and volunteer time, because you really have to think about that when you are looking at the application, specifically around the gathering of materials, including the audit, the financial review, but most specific, really, the data arts profile, because it is looking at financial and programmatic data for your arts and culture programming. It is really time consuming. They've changed the programming to make it a bit more user-friendly. It is more user-friendly. However, it does take significant time from staff to complete this, and you can definitely talk to any current applicant that has completed that in the past. So we want to state, what is your capacity as an organization? Answering that question to see which program suits you best. If you have any additional questions around what sort of programming is best suited for you, please reach out to one of your program managers. That's what we are doing this next month, is meeting with organizations who are wondering which program they should apply for. You could also attend some of our upcoming Q&A sessions, which we'll list at the end. And these sessions are really just come in, ask a question, and then you can leave. It's all going to be virtual. You can stick around to hear other people's questions, but it's really, we're just carving out some time for individuals to join us whenever they can to ask any questions about any specific program, grant program. Some key dates to remember and to make sure that you note on your calendar. The first important date to keep in mind is June 3rd, and that is the date the eligibility check is due. Make sure to submit your eligibility check by 4:30 p.m. We will not accept any late eligibility checks. The online application and reporting system will lock you out at 4:30 p.m. So if you're not able to access it after 4:30 p.m., because you've missed the eligibility check deadline. After you submit the eligibility check, our team will process and review your eligibility and determine whether your organization is deemed eligible to apply. Project support applicants will learn their maximum request amount at the same time. This process could take several weeks, so we encourage you to submit as early as you can in order to give yourself sufficient time to be deemed eligible and work on the application. However, the application, you can definitely work on it on a Word document while you're waiting to get access to the full application in our online reporting system. The application is due August 5th at 4:30 p.m. No late applications will be permitted, both for the eligibility check and the application. The system, again, will lock you out after 4:30 p.m. It will not let you access anything. So if things go on green, or shadowy, that means that you've been locked out and you can't submit your application. Grant amounts for general operating support and cultural heritage will be determined after a panel review. So project support, you will receive an email with your eligibility amount, with your eligibility and your grant amount. Where in general operating support and cultural heritage, that will be determined after the panel review. If you have any questions about that, please talk to a program manager because it's a little complex to explain over a couple of minutes. Grant and grant amounts are not formally made until our Board of Trustees approves the scores and grant amounts at our November board meeting. All CAC board meetings are open to the public. They're currently happening over Zoom, but that might change. You are not required to attend the November board meeting, but you of course are welcome to join us and see the process of approving all our grants for 2020. Once the board approves the grant amounts, we'll start the process of making you an official 2020 grant recipient, which includes signing a grant agreement and then scheduling our new grant recipient workshops where you will learn about some of the requirements that you have as a grant recipient. So here are some documents related to the eligibility check. We've separated them between general operating support, project support, and cultural heritage. I'm not going to go through each single one of them. This information is available on our guidelines. And so if you just click our guidelines, you can see. We also have a grant programs guide that basically shows the same information. So again, if you're trying to figure out which grant program you are trying to apply for, look up the 2022 grant programs guide, which will show all this information and be a useful tool in figuring out which grant program is right for you. So I do want to spend some time talking about the funder report because it is a big component for cultural heritage, general operating support, and for project support if you are requesting more than $5,000. The funder report contains programmatic and financial data from the past 2 years. It might support your application narrative or it might tell a different story. So you want to make sure that that report is matching your application. And if it's telling a different story, you're going to have an opportunity to explain why. It's important for you to review your funder report so you know that what the story that it's telling. For general operating support and cultural heritage, you are required to submit the funder report with your application. For project support, if your organization is requesting more than $5,000, you're also required to submit the funder report with your organization. If you're using the funder report to determine your grant amount, so again, around your arts and culture budget as an organization, you will need to submit your funder report at the eligibility check deadline, because that's how we'll use to figure out your grant amount. If you're not using that, you can submit it during your application if you are requesting more than $5,000. It is an optional upload for organizations who are requesting less than $5,000, and we definitely encourage you to complete it and submit it because it does really provide some information for panelists that could strengthen your application score. All applicants that are required to submit the funder report as part of their application should also check to see how their budget lines up with the Data Arts Funder Report. Do you have a story, a history of raising income from sources included in your budget? Is this project budget appropriate considering the organization's recent financial history or your recent program history? New this year, there is a narrative section in the Cultural Data Profile Survey that gives you the space to explain any inconsistencies or add any information to help panelists better understand how your attendance, program, or financial data connects to your application. In the past, this was separate, and it was actually in the application itself. This year, it's going to be right next to the data. So panelists, when they're looking, for example, at your expenses, they can see if there's any note that you've added instead of going back and forth. We'll also be hosting a Data Arts Cultural Data Profile Workshop on June 6th at 11 a.m. The registration link is on our website, and I will add it to the chat function in case you're interested. The focus on it will be on what's new because they did change it to be a more streamlined report, user-friendlier, and so we want to show you all what's changed.
Hey, Luis, there is a question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
If we are still finalizing 2020 audit, is 2019 CDP report appropriate to submit?
Yes, but I'm assuming that if your audit is, well, let me reverse. Will the audit be completed by the time of the eligibility check? Whoever asked it.
It's Sarah again. Hi. I don't know. I know that we're working on finalizing it now, so I'm asking just so I know what the parameters are in case it's not, or if we need to really push it through.
Well, we use your audit or your 990 to verify the information in your cultural data profile. So it should be matching whatever financial documents you submitted, but I want to allow my colleagues to add any additional notes.
And I can follow up one-on-one separate if we don't know.
Use your 2019 financials if that's what you have, but as Luis said, I would just be consistent across all of like whatever financials you're submitting. It should all be 2019 if that's what you have completed and available. And in addition, we would like your most recently completed 990 as well. So if your 2020 990 is completed, we need that not only, for grant verification purposes, but also just to ensure that your C3 status is, not being compromised at all. So just to verify your C3 status there. But regarding your CDP and, other financials to determine your grant amount, if you have 2019 completed, you can submit your 2019 financials. Does that make sense? Or I see you like maybe.
I think so. What I'm hearing is that, obviously we should try and give you the most recent, but if that is not ready, 2019 is okay, but just be consistent.
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you, Sarah, for the question. And if you submitted an extension for your 990, just let your program manager know, because we do know that that's a pretty typical practice among nonprofits is that you extend it or submit or request an extension from the IRS. Just let us know about that if that is the case for you. Another thing about the cultural funder report is that there's 3 separate funder reports. There's one for general operating support, project support, and cultural heritage. So when you are creating the survey, so after you input your data, it's going to ask you to create a survey. Just make sure that A, it is not the draft version, and B, that it is the program that you are applying for. It's a quick fix. So if you submit, for example, if you're coming in for project support and you submit a cultural heritage funder report by accident, we'll just email you, but just want to let that know because that is something that we do see happening every year. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, India, who will guide us through our new online and application system.
Hello all, and so hi again, my name is India, and so I'll be walking you through our new system, Surveymonkey Apply. So if you're a returning applicant, you may know that we were previously using cac.fluidreview.com for both applications and reporting. We have the site basically updated, and now it's Surveymonkey Apply, which we'll be using for moving forward. Everyone who was a previous user should have received an email letting you know that we have switched over to Surveymonkey Apply, but just be aware that if you were a previous user on Fluid Review, you will have access and your same login information for Surveymonkey Apply. So now I'll walk you through logging in and using the new site. So when you go to cacgrants.smmapply.org, this is what the homepage will look like for you. You will press login and you will again be using the same login information that you used previously for Fluid Review. If you're a new applicant, you will have to create an account and then you will have an account on the website. This is what it will take you to, which is all your applications that are currently on the site. If you are a returning user, you may have a project support or a general operating support grant inside the system already for final reports or mid-year reports. If you're a new applicant or you'll be applying this year, you'll go to programs. And under programs, you'll see all three of the programs that are currently open, which is general operating support, cultural heritage support, and project support. They do have some details about the programs. So if you're just looking to see what programs are available, they do tell you some of the same information that was shared earlier in this workshop. You will press, depending on the program you're applying for, you will press more. Or if you just want to see your application that you currently have, if you've already started an eligibility check for this grant year, you can say, see my application, and it will take you directly to the current application you are working on. So say I'm applying for project support. I would go into project support and I would press the green button, apply. You will need to type in your organization name. And then you will create application. When you create an application, it will immediately take you to the eligibility check, which is the first step that you will need to complete. And it will show you all of the tasks. You will go in, you will begin with first step eligibility form, and you will need to complete that to then move on to the extra task. If you're a returning applicant for project support, you may not have all of the next steps that you're seeing on the screen here. It'll depend on if you've received a grant previously and if you have a primary mission of arts and culture. So you will go in and complete the eligibility form and fill out every open question here. Once you've completed, you'll mark as complete, and then it will show on the side here that you've completed this first step. Once you've completed all of the required tasks, it will allow you to submit. This button will be highlighted and you'll be able to submit your eligibility check. It will then take about, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks for program managers to review that eligibility check, determine your eligibility and your grant amount. You will receive an email from the system letting you know that your eligibility check has been reviewed and if you've been deemed eligible to apply for any of the programs. And so you will, whatever email is used in the system is where the emails will go to. So please let us know if you need to update any emails that are in the system. You can do that in your account by going to this area over here and then press my account. And you'll be able to update any emails here and save that information. You can also add additional collaborators. Maybe you have someone who works on finance. Maybe you want to add the executive director of the organization to the application. And what you would do is go to and then you will add collaborator. Here you'll type in the email address of the collaborator, And then you will ask if you want them to view and edit or view only. Maybe you just want the person to be able to see what you are submitting for the application. If you want them to be able to edit, so add any information, maybe around finances or details for the application, you can give them that access as well. And then you will send an invite. They will receive an email from the system asking them to verify that they would like to be a part of the application. And once they click verify, they'll have access to that application. And so I will pause here to see if anyone has any questions about SurveyMonkey Apply. And if there's any questions in the chat, can someone let me know, because I cannot see the chat right now.
There aren't. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, then I'm going to stop sharing my screen then. Again, if you have any questions, if you're experiencing any technical issues while trying to log into SurveyMonkey Apply, or you're trying to gain access to an eligibility check you've already started, or a final report, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to walk you through the next steps there and get you access to the site.
All right, thank you, India. So want to let you all know of some upcoming workshops. So as I mentioned before, we have multiple Q&A sessions that are coming up. Those are just kind of drop-in sessions where you come in and ask your questions. We have the Data Arts webinar, June 16th. We also have the recording of the interactive IRS Form 990 webinar, which we hosted a couple of weeks ago on April 29th with Plant Moran. And so if you are needing to submit a 990 or a 990 Easy, this is a great webinar to check out. And then once you're deemed eligible, you will gain access to our application workshops, and we'll be also hosting some Q&A sessions around the application itself. So key takeaways, you want to start now, specifically with your eligibility check, because the more time that we have to review, the more time that you will have, the sooner you'll get approved and have access to your application if deemed eligible. Definitely set up your account for our online application reporting system. So if you have any questions around that, you can contact India, or you can contact one of your program managers. We're happy to help you. And if we're not able to, we'll probably send you back to India or Julia, who are really our experts around SurveyMonkey. Review the program guidelines and application. You can also rewatch this webinar. It is being recorded. A lot of information was thrown your way. And so if you have any questions, again, reach out to program managers. Complete your organization's cultural data profile. Data Arts, their support system is fantastic. I've heard nothing but great things. They really will sit with you and help you complete the whole project. Again, we're also hosting a webinar around the new cultural data profile. So I will submit the link in the chat function. And then again, I'm just going to say one more time, complete your eligibility check by June 3rd, 4:30 p.m. That's a Thursday. You want to make sure you get that in. If you have any questions or any issues with that, let us know. We're here to help you and support you in any way that we can. Here's our contact information. So my name is Luis Gomez. Heather Johnson Banks was my other teammate that was also answering some questions in case you catch her. Julia Murphy, India Pierre Ingram, we're all here to help in any way that it can. And there's also some additional resources on our websites, guides, videos, tip sheets. Also, as a public agency, all of the information that is submitted to us is public records. And so if you need access to your previous application, give us a call. If you're wanting to see applications from previous applicants, let us know. We're happy to help with any way that we can. Again, SMU Data Arts is here to help with your Data Arts Funder report. They're excellent. And just check out any of our recordings from our webinars. And that is it. Are there any other questions, Shai?
Will these slides be available on the website?
The slides and the recording will be available on the website.
And will you send the dates for upcoming workshops in an email?
Yes, we will.
Those are all the questions.
Any other questions? I know we're at time, and so I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. All right, that's it. Then thank you all so much for coming. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to a program manager. If you don't have a program manager, just call one of us. We'll pick up the phone. We're all still working from home, but I have access to our phone lines. And again, thank you for coming today. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day and good luck with the eligibility deadline. Thank you.